What happens when a woman's kindness is mistaken for weakness? In the glittering world of billionaires, where loyalty is a commodity and love can be a fatal liability, one woman is about to remind everyone of that timeless truth. This isn't just a story of infidelity. It's the story of a queen reclaiming her castle. When the mistress, a girl she had mentored, looked her in the eye and defiantly said, "You can't stop us," she didn't see the tears of a betrayed wife. She saw the calm, calculating smile of an empress. Because Annabelle Davenport didn't just build a home with her husband, she built an empire. And what the empress builds, the empress can burn to the ground. Get ready, because you are about to witness the moment a billionaire wife fired her husband and his lover, and in doing so reminded the world that hell hath no fury like a woman who built her own throne. The name Davenport wasn't just a name. It was a monolith in the world of technology and finance. Davenport Innovations. The brainchild of Annabelle Davenport was a titan of industry, its sleek, imposing headquarters, a testament to her vision and relentless drive. From the outside, Annabelle and Richard Davenport were the picture of power and grace, a partnership forged in the crucibles of ambition and sealed with what appeared to be unshakable love. They were a dynasty. But within the gilded walls of their penthouse, overlooking the city, a quiet rot had begun to set in a decay that smelled faintly of a perfume Annabelle did not wear. Annabelle was the architect. It was her mind that had conceived the revolutionary software that had launched their company into the stratosphere. It was her steady hand that guided their investments, her foresight that navigated them through treacherous market fluctuations. She was a woman of quiet intensity, her mind always several steps ahead of everyone else in the room. Her smile was a rare and precious thing reserved for moments of genuine joy, and her gaze could be as comforting as a hearth or as sharp as a shard of ice. Richard, on the other hand, was the face. Handsome, charming, and effortlessly charismatic. He was the perfect front man for Annabelle's genius. In the early days, they were an unbeatable team. He would woo investors with his easy confidence, while she would dazzle them with her brilliance. He was the thunder, and she was the lightning. But over the years, the lines had blurred. The world saw the name Davenport and thought of Richard. He graced the covers of magazines, his interviews filled with grand pronouncements about his company's future. He had grown so accustomed to the applause that he seemed to have forgotten who wrote the symphony. He held the title of Chief Operations Officer, a position that sounded vital, but had over time become largely ceremonial. Annabelle, in a misguided attempt to preserve his ego, had insulated him from the true complexities of the empire she managed. It was a fatal miscalculation, an act of love that would arm the man who would betray her. The first discordant note in their perfect harmony was almost imperceptible. A late-night strategy session that left no minutes, no follow-up emails, just the lingering scent of La vie est belle on his suit jacket. Annabelle wore Baccarat Rouge 540. It was a small thing, a detail most would overlook. But Annabelle's mind was a tapestry woven with details. She noticed everything. Then came the credit card statements. Richard managed the corporate expense accounts, a task he insisted on, claiming it was beneath her. Annabelle had allowed it another concession to his pride. Now she saw a charge for a 2-night stay at the Four Seasons, in a city their company had no business, in a city Richard had no reason to visit. When she'd asked him about his week, he'd mentioned being buried in paperwork at the office. He was a clumsy liar, his explanations full of the blustering confidence of a man who believed he was too important to be questioned. The final undeniable piece of the puzzle was Chloe Sterling. Chloe was Annabelle's protégée. A brilliant, ambitious young woman from a modest background, she had joined Davenport Innovations 5 years ago as a junior marketing assistant. Annabelle had seen a spark in her, a hunger that reminded her of her own younger self. She had taken Chloe under her wing personally, mentoring her, promoting her, and championing her ideas. Chloe had risen through the ranks with breathtaking speed, eventually becoming the head of global marketing. She was smart, she was beautiful, and she was, Annabelle had believed, fiercely loyal. The change in Chloe was as subtle as the change in Richard. A new, more expensive wardrobe, a newfound confidence that sometimes bordered on arrogance. She started speaking in meetings with a tone that echoed Richard's, using phrases he favored. She would laugh a little too loudly at his jokes, her gaze lingering on him for a fraction of a second too long. In the vast open-plan office, their orbits seemed to be in a constant, subtle alignment. Annabelle was a strategist, not a soap opera heroine. She would not scream, she would not throw vases. She would gather data. She would build a case. She hired a man named Mr. Harding, a private investigator whose discretion was as legendary as his price tag. He was a ghost, a man who could move through the world unseen. The first report from Mr. Harding landed in Annabelle's secure, encrypted inbox a week later. It was a simple PDF file devoid of any emotional language. It contained dates, times, and addresses. It contained photographs. There they were, Richard and Chloe, stepping out of a black town car, their hands clasped. Richard looking at Chloe with a dopey, lovesick expression Annabelle hadn't seen on his face in years. Chloe, her head tilted back in laughter, looking up at him as if he were the sun and the moon. There were photos of them at a candlelit dinner sharing a bottle of wine. There was a photo of them entering the same 4 seasons, from the credit card statement, their bodies close, their movements synchronized, with each photo a piece of Annabelle's carefully constructed world fractured. The betrayal was a physical thing, a cold, heavy weight in her chest. It wasn't just the infidelity, it was the sheer, breathtaking audacity of it all. They had conducted their affair under her nose, in her company, on her dime. He had used the empire she had built as a playground for his tawdry romance. And the girl she had nurtured, had treated like a younger sister, had looked at her own creation and decided she wanted a piece of it for herself. She hadn't just stolen Annabelle's husband. She had tried to steal her life. Mr. Harding's final report was the most damning. It included audio surveillance from a bug placed in a hotel room. Annabelle listened to it once, her face a mask of stone. She heard their laughter. She heard them mock her. She's always so busy. Chloe's voice dripping with faux sympathy. Buried in spreadsheets and projections. Does she even know how to have fun anymore? She loves the work more than she ever loved me, Richard's voice, full of self-pity. She built a cage for herself, a beautiful golden cage, and she locked me in it with her. Well, you're free now, Chloe whispered. We're free. Annabelle closed the laptop. The storm inside her was raging, a hurricane of grief and fury. But on the surface she was the calm eye of the storm. They thought she was in a cage. They were about to find out that she wasn't locked in with them. They were locked in with her, and the cage was about to get a whole lot smaller. She spent the next 48 hours in a state of icy focus. She reviewed every contract, every clause, every legal document that bound the 3 of them together. She consulted with her personal legal team, a trio of sharks who smelled blood in the water. She examined the prenuptial agreement Richard had signed years ago, a document he had barely glanced at. So sure was he of their future, so eager to be part of her rising star. It was, she was pleased to confirm, ironclad. The empire was hers. The name Davenport on the building belonged to her vision, her work. His contribution in the grand legal scheme of things was negligible. She learned that Richard, in his arrogance, had made Chloe a signatory on a secondary corporate account. A foolish, sentimental gesture. He had also given her a company car and a corporate apartment perks far above her pay grade, all justified under vague executive retention expenses. He had been careless, blinded by lust and a sense of untouchable power. The plan that formed in Annabel's mind was not born of emotion. It was a cold, calculated corporate execution. She would not confront them in the privacy of their home. This was not a domestic dispute. This was a hostile takeover of her own life. The confrontation would happen in the one place she held absolute power, the place they had so brazenly disrespected. It would happen in the boardroom. She sent out a single email, her fingers moving calmly over the keyboard. Subject: urgent and mandatory board meeting. Q3. Strategic review. The email was sent to all senior executives, including Richard Davenport and Chloe Sterling. The time was set for 9 a.m. the next day. The agenda was deliberately vague. That evening, Richard came home, humming a tune. He loosened his tie, kissed her on the cheek, a casual, thoughtless gesture that made her skin crawl, and poured himself a whiskey. "Strange that last-minute meeting you called," he said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "Everything all right?" "Just some new initiatives I want to discuss." Annabel, replied, her voice even. She was looking at a financial report on her tablet, not meeting his gaze. "Something I think the board needs to be aligned on." "Well, I'm sure you'll handle it," he said, patting her on the shoulder, before heading to their bedroom to shower. "You always do." Annabel stayed in the living room, the city lights twinkling below her like a sea of fallen stars. He was right. She always did handle it. And tomorrow morning, she would handle him. She would handle them both. The Empress was about to address her court, and judgment was coming. The boardroom at Davenport Innovations was on the 50th floor, a cathedral of glass and steel that offered a panoramic view of the sprawling metropolis. It was a room designed to intimidate, to convey power. At the head of the massive, polished obsidian table sat a single throne-like chair. It was Annabel's chair. The executives filed in their faces a mixture of curiosity and anxiety. An unscheduled 9 a.m. meeting with a vague agenda from Annabel Davenport herself was enough to set anyone on edge. Richard strode in with his usual air of unearned authority, giving a few back-patting greetings. Chloe followed a moment later, looking sleek and confident, in a crimson dress that was just a little too bold for a standard board meeting. Their eyes met for a fleeting conspiratorial moment across the room, a silent acknowledgement of their shared secret, their shared future. They believed they were the keepers of a secret fire. They had no idea they were standing in a room doused in gasoline. Annabel entered last. She was the picture of serene authority, dressed in a sharp navy blue suit that was both feminine and formidable. She offered a polite, professional smile to the room, her eyes sweeping over each face, before landing for just a moment on Richard, and then on Chloe. There was no anger in her gaze, no hint of the storm raging within. There was only a calm, unnerving clarity. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice crisp and clear, filling the acoustically perfect room. "Thank you for joining me on such short notice. I've called this meeting to discuss a new addition to our corporate governance protocols. A low murmur went through the room. This was not what they expected. They were anticipating a discussion on market expansion or a new product launch. Annabelle clicked a button, and the large screen behind her lit up. The title read, Senior Executive Ethics and Morality Clause. As we continue to grow as a global leader, Annabelle explained her tone perfectly. Even it's imperative that the conduct of our senior leadership is beyond reproach, both professionally and personally. Our brand is built on trust, and the trust begins with us in this room. She began to outline the new clause. It spoke of fiduciary duty, of avoiding conflicts of interest, and of maintaining a standard of personal conduct that would not bring the company into disrepute. It was on the surface a standard piece of corporate boilerplate. But it was the context, the timing, that made it a weapon. As she spoke, she watched them. Richard shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His brow furrowed. He was starting to feel a prickle of unease. This felt targeted. Chloe, however, was less astute. Her ambition and arrogance were a blinding combination. She saw this not as a threat, but as an opportunity to assert her newfound influence. Annabelle Chloe interjected, her voice smooth and confident. The use of Annabelle's first name in such a formal setting was a deliberate power play. With all due respect, doesn't this feel a bit archaic? We're a forward-thinking tech company. Are we really going to start legislating the private lives of our executives? It seems like an overreach. Several heads in the room turned towards Chloe, surprised at her audacity. Richard, seeing his lover take the lead, felt a surge of misguided courage. He decided to back her play, to present them as a united progressive front against Annabelle's supposedly outdated ideas. I have to agree with Chloe, Richard said, leaning forward. We hire adults here. As long as their performance at work isn't affected, what they do on their own time is their business. We risk losing top talent with a policy like this. Annabelle listened patiently, her expression unreadable. She let the silence hang in the air for a moment after he finished speaking. Thank you both for your candid feedback, she said, her voice dangerously soft. It's always valuable to hear different perspectives. She then turned to the rest of the board. Does anyone else share Mr. Davenport and Ms. Sterling's concerns? No one moved. No one spoke. They could sense the tension, the unseen currents swirling in the room. They knew better than to cross Annabelle Davenport when she had this look in her eyes. Very well, Annabelle said, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips. That concludes the presentation. The final draft will be circulated by legal. Thank you all for your time. That will be all. She paused, then added, as if as an afterthought, Richard, Chloe, could you stay behind for a moment? Please. The other executives filed out of the room, with palpable relief casting curious glances back at the trio that remained. The heavy glass door clicked shut, sealing them in. The sound was deafeningly final. Now it was just the three of them, the wife, the husband, and the mistress, standing in the heart of the empire the wife had built. That was a rather pointed display. Richard began attempting to take the offensive. What was that all about? Annabelle. I was just gauging opinions, Annabelle replied calmly, remaining at the head of the table. Chloe, emboldened by their public stand, walked towards the table, a triumphant smirk on her face. She stood beside Richard, a clear and defiant statement of their alliance. She looked at Annabelle, a woman she had once admired, with a gaze that was now a mixture of pity and contempt. You know, don't you? Chloe said, her voice no longer trying to hide her arrogance. "You can stop with the corporate games, Annabelle." Annabelle's serene expression didn't change. "Know what?" Chloe laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Us. Richard and me. It's done. The charade is over." She reached out and took Richard's hand, lacing her fingers through his. Richard, though looking pale and nervous, allowed it. He had thrown his lot in with her. It was then that Chloe delivered the line she thought would be her checkmate, the words that would shatter the woman in front of her and cement her victory. "You can't stop us," she declared, her voice ringing with triumphant finality. The words hung in the sterile air of the boardroom. It was a declaration of war, a challenge thrown at the feet of a queen in her own castle. Annabelle looked at their joined hands. She looked at Richard's weak, frightened face. She looked at Chloe's smug, gloating expression, and the storm within her finally broke, not with thunder and lightning, but with a terrifying Arctic calm. Her smile, which had been faint, now widened. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated power, and it sent a chill down Richard's spine. Chloe, in her hubris, didn't recognize the danger. "You're right," Annabelle said, her voice as smooth as silk, yet as hard as diamond. "I can't stop you from being together. I can't stop you from destroying the vows you made, Richard. And I can't stop you, Chloe, from betraying a woman who gave you everything." She let that hang in the air for a beat. "But the new ethics clause, that was just a formality, a little test which you both failed spectacularly." She picked up a thin, leather-bound folder from the table beside her. She slid it across the polished obsidian surface. It stopped directly in front of them. "Your actions have already violated half a dozen clauses in the contracts you already signed. Clauses about misuse of corporate funds, conflicts of interest and conduct, unbecoming of an officer of this company." Richard's face went white as he stared at the folder. He knew what it was without even opening it. "As for stopping you," Annabelle continued, her smile never faltering, "I have no interest in stopping you from being a couple. But I can fire you, both of you, from my empire." The words landed with the force of a physical blow. Chloe's smirk vanished, replaced by a look of stunned disbelief. Richard looked as if he might faint. You can't be serious," Richard stammered. "Annabelle, this is my company too." "My name is on the door." "Your name is on the door because you married the woman who owns the company." Annabelle corrected him, her voice devoid of any emotion. "And as the majority shareholder and CEO, I am terminating your employment, effective immediately for gross misconduct." She then turned her icy gaze to Chloe. "And you, Ms. Sterling, you are also terminated effective immediately for the same reasons. Your corporate apartment, your company car, and all your expense accounts are now deactivated. I believe you have an hour to clear your personal belongings from your desk." Chloe was speechless. The world she had so carefully constructed, the future she had so arrogantly assumed was hers, was crumbling to dust around her. You bitch," she finally hissed, her voice trembling with rage. Annabelle didn't even flinch. She simply pressed a small, discreet button on the console in front of her. Security. A moment later, the boardroom door opened and 2 large, impassive security guards entered. They were men Annabelle paid very well for their loyalty and discretion. "Mr. Davenport and Ms. Sterling will be leaving us," Annabelle said to the guards, her voice as calm as if she were ordering lunch. "Please escort them to their respective offices to collect their personal items and then see them out of the building. Their access has been revoked." Richard looked at Annabel, his eyes pleading. "Annabel, please, don't do this." For the first time, a flicker of something personal crossed Annabel's face. It was not anger. It was not sadness. It was a profound, almost weary disappointment. "You did this, Richard," she said quietly. "You and her. This is not a punishment. This is a consequence." The guards moved forward. One stood beside Richard, the other beside Chloe. The reality of the situation was crashing down on them with brutal force. They were being thrown out, humiliated, disposed of. As the guards led them away, two disgraced executives being frog-marched through the heart of the company they thought they could control. Chloe looked back over her shoulder one last time. She saw Annabel standing alone at the head of the table framed by the city skyline. She wasn't a wife scorned. She was an empress on her throne, surveying her kingdom, having calmly and efficiently purged it of a poison she had allowed to fester for far too long. The silence that filled the boardroom after they were gone was not empty. It was full of the sound of an empire being reclaimed. The immediate aftermath of the boardroom execution was not a loud explosion, but a series of quiet, devastating implosions. For Richard and Chloe, the world did not end with a bang, but with the cold, silent click of a lock, the denial of an access card, the finality of a dead phone line. Their shared delusion of a triumphant future evaporated on the pavement outside the gleaming tower of Davenport Innovations. Richard found himself in a sterile suite at the Mandarin Oriental, a hotel he once frequented for lavish corporate dinners. Now he was paying the exorbitant nightly rate from his personal account, watching his liquid assets hemorrhage with every passing hour. The initial shock, the raw humiliation of being frog-marched out of his own life, gave way to a simmering volcanic rage. He paced the plush carpet like a caged animal, his phone hot in his hand. His first call was to the head of the company's legal department, a man he had golfed with dozens of times. He was met with the chilly, impenetrable wall of a junior paralegal. "I'm sorry, Mr. Davenport, but our firm's relationship is with the corporation, not with you personally. We are unable to advise you. We wish you the best." Click. The next day, a sleek, black-clad courier arrived. He didn't ask for a signature. He simply handed over a crisp, leather-bound document portfolio and a single sealed box. The box contained the curated detritus of his marriage, his favorite cashmere sweaters, his collection of vintage watches, his silver-framed photo from their wedding day, now face down. The portfolio contained the true instrument of his ruin. It was a copy of their prenuptial agreement, the one he had signed with a flourish years ago, dismissing it as a mere formality for a love as grand as theirs. Now, reading the cold, precise clauses Annabel's far-sighted lawyers had drafted, he felt a sweat break out on his brow. He had no claim to her personal wealth, which was vast. He had no claim to her stock in the company. He had no claim to any intellectual property. He was entitled to a one-time payout, a figure that seemed insultingly small compared to the billions he had considered his own. He was in legal terms a footnote. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. He hadn't been a partner in an empire. He had been an employee with spousal privileges, and his employment had been terminated. Chloe's descent was even swifter and more brutal. She went from her high-floor office directly to the parking garage of the luxury apartment building the company had provided her. Her access card was denied. A stony-faced concierge informed her that the lease had been terminated that morning. Her belongings, he explained, without a trace of sympathy, would be packed and sent to a storage facility, the first month's rent paid as a courtesy. As she stood on the curb, reeling, a tow truck arrived and began methodically hooking up the gleaming silver Porsche the company had leased for her. She tried to call Richard, her fingers trembling as she stabbed at the screen. Straight to voicemail. She tried again. Voicemail. A third time. The call wouldn't even connect. He had blocked her number. In the span of 3 hours, she had gone from being the ascendant queen-in-waiting to a woman with a designer handbag and nowhere to sleep. She was not his partner in rebellion. She was collateral damage, a piece he had sacrificed in a game he had already lost. While their worlds crumbled, Annabelle moved with the serene efficiency of a master strategist clearing the board. She held a brief all-hands meeting with her senior leadership, the ones who remained. There was no gossip, no gloating. She was crisp, professional, and forward-looking. "As you know, there has been a change in our executive structure," she announced, her voice calm and resolute. "Richard Davenport and Chloe Sterling are no longer with the company. I have absorbed the duties of the COO for the foreseeable future, and I have promoted Eleanor Vance to head of global marketing effective immediately. She is brilliant, and she has my full confidence." She then laid out her vision for the next quarter, her mind already 3 moves ahead. The team, sensing the renewed focus and the absence of the toxic drama that had subtly plagued them for months, felt a palpable sense of relief. The empire, far from faltering, felt stronger, more purposeful. That evening, alone in her cavernous penthouse, Annabelle allowed herself a single moment of reflection. She stood before the vast wall of glass, looking down at the city lights. There was a dull ache, a phantom limb of grief for the man Richard had once been, for the dream of the partnership she thought they had. But it was overshadowed by a profound, cleansing sense of liberation. She had amputated a diseased limb to save the body. The pain was real, but so was the certainty that she would heal and be stronger for it. But a man like Richard Davenport, whose entire identity was built on a foundation of pride and public perception, could not accept oblivion. Humiliation, she knew, was a more potent fuel than ambition. After a week of frantic, failed attempts to find a lawyer who would dare to challenge Annabelle's ironclad prenup, Richard's rage coalesced into a singular, burning purpose revenge. If he couldn't have the empire, he would burn it to the ground. He couldn't attack her legally or financially, but he could attack her creation. He possessed a decade's worth of operational knowledge, not her visionary secrets, but the practical logistical scaffolding that held the company together. He knew their key suppliers, their top talent, their distribution networks, and he knew exactly who would pay for that information. Alistair Finch, the CEO of Phoenix Conglomerate, was a corporate sociopath in a bespoke suit. He didn't build, he consumed. His office, a stark, minimalist expanse of chrome and black leather, felt less like a workspace and more like a predator's lair. When Richard, humbled and desperate, requested a meeting, Alistair agreed immediately. He listened patiently as Richard, his voice thick with venom, laid out his proposal. He offered a roadmap to cripple Davenport innovations from within. "I can give you their jugular," Richard hissed, leaning over Alistair's massive desk. "Their main cobalt supplier in the Congo, I know the political instability. There can be leveraged. Their lead AI programmer, I know his wife wants to move back to California, and I know his price. I can give you the blueprint of their upcoming product launch, enough to disrupt their market entry, and sow chaos." Alistair watched him, his eyes devoid of emotion. He saw a broken, bitter man, a perfect tool. "Your loyalty is impressive, Richard." Alistair said, a thin, cruel smile playing on his lips. "I believe we can work together. You provide the intelligence. I will provide the muscle." The assault began subtly, then escalated with terrifying speed. A key supplier of microchips suddenly defaulted, citing a force majeure that smelled suspiciously manufactured. 3 top project managers in Davenport's most promising new division resigned in a single week, all accepting eye-watering offers from a Phoenix subsidiary. Then came the media campaign, a slow drip of negative press expertly crafted to create a narrative of a company in free fall, helmed by a vindictive, emotionally compromised CEO. Annabelle's stock, for the first time in 5 years of steady, relentless growth, began to bleed. In the midst of this escalating war, Chloe Sterling made her final desperate move. Having been ghosted by Richard and shunned by everyone she knew, she saw only one path back to relevance. She secured a meeting with Alistair Finch herself, believing she held a trump card. "Richard only knows operations," she argued, sitting across from the impassive CEO. "I know the strategy. I know Annabelle's mind. I helped build the marketing campaigns for the next 2 years. I can give you her playbook." Alistair let her finish, then steepled his fingers, looking at her with an expression of profound disappointment, as one might look at a flawed piece of merchandise. "Ms. Sterling," he said, his voice dangerously soft, "let me offer you a piece of advice. Loyalty is a currency. You spent yours betraying the woman who invented you. Then you allied yourself with a fool who was promptly cast out. Now you come to me, offering to betray the fool. You seem to believe that your willingness to betray everyone makes you a valuable asset. In fact, it makes you utterly worthless." He stood up, a clear and final dismissal. "You are a snake that has eaten its own tail. There is nothing left for you to offer. My assistant will validate your parking." The words struck Chloe with the force of a physical blow. She left his office not just unemployed, but completely and utterly erased. She was no one, a ghost haunting the edges of a world that had already forgotten her. The siege on Davenport Innovations intensified. The board, once Annabelle's staunchest supporters, was now in a full-blown panic. George Carswell called an emergency meeting, his face ashen. "Annabelle, he's killing us," he exclaimed, gesturing wildly at a projection of their stock's downward trend. "Finch is a shark, and Richard has chummed the water with our blood. The market has lost faith. They see a messy divorce, not a company. They see you as a woman on a rampage." Another board member, a pragmatist named Marcus Thorne, chimed in. "Annabelle, we have the utmost respect for you, but perhaps the best move for the company is for you to temporarily step back as CEO. Let an interim leader stabilize the ship. It would signal to the market that the company is separate from your personal difficulties." It was the ultimate betrayal, wrapped in the language of concern. They were asking her to surrender her crown to appease the man she had just banished. They saw her as the problem, the emotional variable in their financial equation. They had forgotten who she was. Annabelle let them all speak her face, an unreadable mask of calm. When their panicked pleas and veiled insults had finally subsided, she stood. Her posture was erect, her gaze sweeping across their frightened faces with a look that was not anger, but pity. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice cutting through the tension with chilling precision. "You see chaos and you are afraid. You see a bully and you want to offer him your lunch money. You are looking at the storm, but you fail to see the weapon I have been forging within it." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle in the room. "There will be no surrender. I will not be stepping back. You are worried about a narrative. Then we will change the narrative. You are worried about shareholder value. Then I will create more value than Alistair Finch could dream of stealing. I am calling a general shareholder meeting. In 2 weeks. That's suicide, George sputtered. Finch will crucify you in a public forum. A dangerous, confident smile touched Annabel's lips for the first time. Let him. Let him bring his puppet. Let him bring his charts and his lies. He thinks he's laying a siege, but he's forgotten one crucial thing. What's that? Marcus asked, leaning forward. He's on my territory, Annabel said, and he's about to walk into a trap he can't even see. She turned and walked out, leaving a boardroom full of stunned, terrified men in her wake. The Empress was not abdicating. She was going to war. The 2 weeks that followed were a masterclass in psychological warfare, and Annabel was, for the moment, on the receiving end. Alistair Finch was a predator who understood that a kill was often preceded by exhausting the prey. He launched a media onslaught of relentless, suffocating intensity. His silver hair and vulpine smile were everywhere on cable news, in the financial papers, on influential podcasts. His message was consistent, polished, and lethally effective. Davenport Innovations is a titan with a cracked foundation, he'd say, his voice resonating with grave concern. Leadership is distracted, embroiled in personal conflict. The ship is taking on water, and the captain is more focused on who pushed her overboard than on steering towards safe harbor. We at Phoenix offer not a hostile takeover, but a necessary rescue. We will restore stability, refocus on the core business, and unlock the value that is currently being squandered. Richard Davenport was Alistair's star witness, his prize poodle trotted out for carefully orchestrated appearances. He looked haggard, a ghost of his former charismatic self, but he played his part. I have profound concerns for the company I helped build, he'd state, looking earnestly into the camera. Annabel is brilliant, but her recent actions have been erratic, driven by emotion. The company are shareholders, they deserve better. In a private meeting, Alistair had made Richard's position painfully clear. You are a tool, Richard, he'd said, not unkindly, but with the cold finality of a butcher assessing a side of beef. A useful one for now. Remember your lines, hit your marks, and you will be compensated. Deviate, and you will find that the world is very cold indeed when you have no one left to turn to. Richard had simply nodded, the full weight of his powerlessness crushing him. While this storm raged in public, Annabel's own boardroom felt like the heart of a hurricane. The board members, led by the perpetually panicked George Carswell, demanded a private meeting. They cornered her in the very room where she had fired her husband. Annabel, this has gone too far, George implored, his face slick with sweat. The stock is down 7%. 7. Our investors are calling non-stop. Finch is defining the narrative, and you are silent. You must make a counteroffer. Settle with Richard. Pay him off. For God's sake, do something before he burns the whole house down around us. Annabel listened to their frantic pleading, her hands resting calmly on the obsidian table. Her silence was not weakness, it was discipline. While they were reacting to the theatrics, she was preparing the stage for the final act. Every night, she was in a secure location, a nondescript warehouse on the industrial side of town, with a skeleton crew of her most trusted engineers and her razor-sharp legal team. They were the only other people on Earth who knew about Project Genesis. They rehearsed every detail of the presentation, stress-tested every claim, and prepared for every possible question. They were building a bombshell while the world was distracted by firecrackers. There will be no settlement, Annabel told her board, her voice cutting through their panic like a laser. My silence is not an absence of strategy. Mr. Finch is playing checkers on a board where I am playing chess. I ask for your trust for 1 more week. Attend the shareholder meeting. After that, you may judge my leadership as you see fit." She left no room for argument. Her confidence was so absolute, so unnerving, that it silenced them at least for a time. The day of the shareholder meeting arrived with the oppressive humidity of a summer storm. The city's largest convention hall auditorium was packed to the rafters, a gladiatorial arena for the modern age. The air crackled with anticipation. Alistair Finch swept in with his entourage, all sharp suits and predatory smiles. He took his seat in the front row, a conquering hero arriving for his coronation. Richard trailed in his wake, looking pale and insubstantial, a man haunted by the ghosts of his own bad decisions. He avoided looking at the stage, knowing Annabel would be there soon. Then she entered. A side door opened, and Annabel walked onto the stage. She wore a tailored suit of pure, brilliant white. It was a statement of startling clarity against the dark wood of the stage. She wasn't a woman in mourning for her marriage or her company. She was light. She was power. She walked not to the safety of a podium, but to the exposed center of the stage, a small, sleek remote in her hand. The hall fell into a hushed, expectant silence. As per the agreed-upon schedule, Alistair Finch was given the floor first. He was a master orator, and he used his time to weave a compelling narrative of doom. He projected charts showing the dip in stock price quotes from anonymous, worried employees and financial models that predicted a slow decline under current leadership. "The evidence is clear," he said, pacing the stage like a panther. "Davenport Innovations is a ship adrift. Richard Davenport, the man who provided the charm and the public face to this company for years, has been unceremoniously ousted. Key personnel are leaving. Supply lines, once the bedrock of this company, are in disarray. This is not growth. This is chaos. It is the result of a leadership team distracted by personal vendettas. My proposal is simple, a cash plus stock offer that represents a 25% premium on yesterday's closing price. A generous offer to rescue your investment from this ongoing turmoil." He finished to a solid round of applause. He had presented a clear problem and offered a simple, profitable solution. The board members looked nervously at Annabel. Richard allowed himself a flicker of a triumphant smile. Then Annabel moved back to the center of the stage. Her calm was a stark contrast to Alistair's aggressive energy. "Thank you, Mr. Finch, for that compelling work of fiction," she began, a hint of steel in her voice. A few titters ran through the audience. "He's presented you with a story of chaos. I'd like to present you with a few facts. Mr. Finch mentioned our supply chain disruptions." The massive screen behind her lit up not with charts, but with the logos of 3 overseas manufacturing firms. These 3 companies were until last month major suppliers. They were also cited for gross violations of labor laws and for using materials that are devastating to the environment. My former COO, Mr. Davenport, repeatedly argued to keep these contracts because they were cheap. I terminated them. Yes, it caused a short-term disruption. It was also the right thing to do. This company will be a leader, not just in technology, but in corporate responsibility. The moral high ground was now hers. She clicked the remote. The screen changed to an internal performance dashboard. A dozen headshots appeared, the same managers who had been poached by Phoenix. Next to their faces, their performance metrics were displayed in a stark red. Mr. Finch spoke of a talent exodus. He is correct. This talent has exited. He proudly paid a premium to acquire our bottom 10% of performers. I consider that a favor, Alistair. You have streamlined my company and improved our overall efficiency. My sincerest thanks." The audience roared with laughter. It was a humiliating public refutation. Alistair's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching in his cheek. Richard looked as if he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. Annabel let the laughter die down. Her demeanor shifted from sharp wit to serious purpose. "But these are minor points. Distractions. Mr. Finch and Mr. Davenport have made a critical and frankly amateur error. They have assessed this company's value based on what they can see. They believe they know the full inventory. They are mistaken." She paused, taking a deliberate sip of water. The entire hall held its breath. "For 36 months, I have been diverting a portion of my own salary and personal investment returns into a top-secret, off-the-books research initiative. It was firewalled from the main company to protect it from corporate espionage and short-sighted market pressures. It was codenamed Project Genesis." The screen behind her went black for a dramatic second. Then it exploded with light and motion. A breathtaking 3D animation filled the screen, displaying a latticework of shimmering, pulsating hexagonal cells. "What you are looking at," Annabel announced, her voice resonating with a founder's passion, "is the world's first stable, scalable, room-temperature superconductor matrix for energy storage. Project Genesis is not a theory. It is a revolutionary battery technology that is over 500% more efficient than the best lithium-ion cell. It uses no rare earth minerals, is completely recyclable, and has a near-infinite charge cycle. It has the power to decentralize energy grids, to make electric vehicles run for thousands of miles on a single charge, to power entire cities on clean, stored energy." A wave of shock washed over the auditorium. This wasn't an upgrade. It was a paradigm shift. People were pulling out their phones. Journalists were typing frantically. An analyst in the front row could be heard whispering, "My God, it's the Holy Grail." Alistair Finch looked as though he had been struck by lightning. His entire takeover was predicated on the known value of Davenport Innovations. He was trying to buy a candle factory, and she had just revealed that she had secretly invented the light bulb. Annabel let the magnitude of the reveal sink in before delivering the final killing blow. The patents for Project Genesis were approved and finalized last Tuesday. The technology is secure, and today I am announcing the immediate formation of a new wholly owned subsidiary named Davenport Future. All patents, assets, and personnel related to Project Genesis will be transferred to this entity, which will be folded into the parent company. The audited preliminary valuation of this subsidiary alone is triple the current market capitalization of Davenport Innovations. Checkmate. Her words hung in the air, rewriting the future of energy and the present reality in that room. Alistair Finch's generous offer of a 25% premium was now a laughable insult. He could not afford her company. No one could. "So, Mr. Finch," Annabel concluded, her voice now calm and absolute, her gaze locked on him, "I appreciate your interest, but your offer is rejected. The company is not for sale." She then shifted her eyes to the pathetic figure beside him. "And Richard, thank you for this opportunity. You inadvertently created the pressure that accelerated this announcement. Your betrayal has been in a strange way the single most profitable event in this company's history." The room was silent for one heartbeat, and then it erupted. It was a tidal wave of sound, a sustained, thundering, standing ovation that felt as if it could shake the foundations of the building. Shareholders were on their feet, not just clapping, but roaring their approval. They were not just investors, they were converts, Alistair Finch sat frozen for a long moment, his mask of composure shattered, revealing the raw fury and humiliation beneath. He gathered his papers with jerky, furious movements and stormed out of the auditorium without a single backward glance, his team scrambling in his wake. Richard did not move. He was a statue of shame. The applause was like physical blows, each clap a reminder of his folly. He had schemed to take half of a kingdom and had ended up a court jester in the story of its glorious new expansion. He had not only lost, he had become a permanent monument to his own insignificance. Annabel remained on the stage, bathed in the bright lights, the sound of her victory washing over her. She felt a profound sense of release. She had faced down the ghosts of her past, the betrayal of her husband, the avarice of her rival, and had emerged not just intact, but infinitely stronger. She had protected her creation, reaffirmed her identity, and proven that the greatest empire is the one you build within yourself. Her reign had just begun. And so Annabel Davenport stood victorious, not just as a billionaire, but as the architect of her own destiny. She proved that the most powerful response to betrayal isn't revenge, it's success. She didn't just fire her cheating husband and his mistress, she rendered them completely irrelevant footnotes in the story of her rise. Her empire wasn't just saved, it was reborn stronger and more formidable than ever. This story is a powerful reminder that you should never underestimate the quiet ones, the builders, the thinkers. For when their world is threatened, they don't just fight back. They change the entire game. What did you think of Annabel's ultimate power move? Let us know in the comments below. If you were inspired by her story of strength and strategy, don't forget to hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded of their own power, and be sure to subscribe for more stories of incredible triumphs and dramatic downfalls. Thank you for watching.